What's going on, college football fans? Welcome back to the First and Long College Football Show. As always, I am your co-host Marcus, joined by my co-host Mason, and we have got round one of college football playoffs. We've got our predictions, we've got our thoughts together, and we're ready to discuss it with you all. And speaking of you all, thank you all so much for all the support on the channel, really throughout the whole season, but this week, again, we've had tons of fans from Notre Dame, Indiana, Ohio State, Tennessee, all across this great country. And we've had some great conversations. And with that being said, we're going to bring some of those comments onto the show today. So we're going to kind of comment on the comments. So that should be pretty entertaining, as the comment section always is on the lovely YouTube, as you all know. And we're going to also talk through our bracket and kind of where we're at and what we're kind of, what our thoughts are on the overall synopsis of the college football playoff headed into round two after this weekend, of course. So we'll kind of do our best to make sense of that. And then I think we'll kind of close out the show talking about some coaching changes, some transfer portal stuff, stuff that I don't want to get in the way of what is the most important here, which is the college football playoff. So that's why we're going to throw that on the end of the show there. Stuff that has to do with next year is obviously not near as important as what we've got going on here in 2024. So we're going to break it all down with you guys. Welcome to the First and Long College Football Show. As I said, guys, we're going to be going over round one. Mason, how are you? These games have generated a whole lot of conversation. In my personal life, on my YouTube live, and throughout the comment section, throughout the country. Are you ready to give some predictions on these games? We're about to see history be made this coming up weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. We did this, I guess it was Thursday night. We did our last little early look at these games, and since then, I don't think I've really changed my opinions. I think I've just come a little bit more concrete on my thoughts here, and ready to share that with you guys. I'm so excited. This week we're playing games here, just a few days. It's tough because I think I'm still used to the regular season ending and then it taking a few weeks before we got bowl games. Well, they're here, they're being played. That is happening, and I love it. Ready to break it down with you here. Obviously, the bowl games have lost a lot of their seasoning, considering, that first of all, half of these teams' players are in the transfer portal or graduating or going to the NFL, so they're not playing in these games. They because of the 12-team playoff, the games have absolutely no meaning, and that's a topic for discussion for another day. That's a summer topic, but it is a little bit unfortunate that those games don't mean as much as they used to. I don't find myself checking the calendar constantly, saying, "Oh, what games are coming up? What's going on this week? What are the bowl games this week and then next week? And I can't wait for this." And that's gone. I mean, that is absolutely gone. The best matchup you've got is Alabama and Michigan. And if you've been paying attention to the transfer portal, half of Alabama's team is gone, and not just like the normal number of players that are leaving. Where and we'll get to the transfer portal at the end of the show, but I mean, Alabama is one that I'm circling and saying, what the crap is going on? Because they've got starters that are leaving their program, and it's not good. It's not good. We haven't seen that. We never saw that under Saban, even though the transfer portal wasn't what it is now. It's pretty wild, but again, we'll get to that. I'm excited to break down the playoff games with you. This first round is going to be absolutely epic. We got home games being played, even though, and I don't know if you heard about this, Mark, but it sounds like the college football playoff committee, or not the committee, but the college football playoff as an entity is going to control the sound and video systems at these stadiums. So typically, you go play at Penn State, and Penn State has control over their audio and video, right? Well, now because of the playoffs being played at these home stadiums, the CFP is taking control of the audio. So when Tennessee runs out at Ohio State at the shoe, they're gonna have their fight song playing. They're gonna have intro music and lights and fog machines, just like they were at home. So both teams are gonna have that, and I don't know. It's just kind of an interesting thought to me, but I don't know if I agree with that, because that kind of takes the whole home field advantage out of things if you're giving them things like that, and then before you know it, they're gonna have to give up half their stadium or something. I mean, I just don't agree with that. I think you earn the right to have as many home field advantage opportunities as regulations allow in a regular season game. So just one thing I kind of turned my nose up at. I don't know if you heard about that.
It makes total sense to me, because that whole group of people that are making those decisions are not actually college football fans for the most part. I know there's probably some outliers, but those are the pump and frill folks, and those are the folks that I despise. And look, what I mean by that is they're more worried about the product on TV than they are about creating a real home field advantage, which I still think the teams have, no doubt about it. But as you said, I mean, it's just not exactly the same, and we gotta figure out a way to get some of these TV executives to relinquish their grip that they've got on some of this stuff, because look, if pretty much any of the bad decisions that have been made so far have been made due to or affected by these types of folks getting their hands on our sport. And we have to, as a fan base, kick and scream. We can't be the silent majority on this thing. We have to talk about it. And that's really the only way that anything is going to change. And the conferences have to do something about it. And, the states, if you will, that being the conferences, need to retain their power. And don't get it twisted. Don't let the tail wag the dog. The conferences are the ones that control the power, and I think we know which conferences we're talking about without me having to say so. All right, well, guys, we've got some awesome matchups that we're going to talk about today, and as I said, we're going to bring up some of you guys' comments that have been on the channel over the last couple of days. If you got something you want to add to the show right now and you're watching live, put it in the comment section. We tried our very best to keep up with those throughout the show. Usually Mason or I, if we're not talking, we're trying to keep an eye on that thing. So throw it in there, right? And we'll do our best to get to it and possibly read it on the show. But anybody that's watching now, watching later, please hit that thumbs up button for us. And if you're not subscribed, I hope that you will consider doing so. First and Long is a relatively new channel. This year being our second year, but really being our first year, really going after it here. And it's been a whole heck of a lot of fun, and you guys have made it that way. So we want to get the good word out. All right, let's jump into this thing, Mason, and we'll kind of introduce these games as we did earlier this week. We've already done an early preview on these games, so we're going to give our final predictions today and kind of rehash some of the things that we've talked about, and then kind of hash over some of the things that have been talked about in the comment section. Thank y'all so much for joining us. Let's start with the Tennessee-Ohio State game, and then we're going to go Indiana at Notre Dame, and then we'll finish up with the Clemson at Texas and SMU at Penn State. All right, let's jump into this. Let's get our banners going. As you guys know, maybe you don't know if you're new to the channel, when we do these live shows, you guys are kind of like behind the scenes hanging out with us. These are we're making clips to be put on our channel here in the next, some of them will be loaded up tonight. That's why we're on early, so we can get them loaded up tonight. So in between these breakdowns is when we'll read all the comments and kind of interact with you guys. And thanks for keeping us company. I appreciate it. And if it seems a little weird and choppy, that's what we're doing. There is a method to this madness. We're not clinically insane, even though it may seem that way at times. Okay. Tennessee at Ohio State. This has got to be one of the most talked about college football playoff games that I can remember going into the game. I think that this one being in Ohio at the shoe, ninth game, adds a whole nother element to this huge matchup. that everybody is so excited about. At the time we made this graphic, Ohio State was a 7-point favorite. I'm not sure if that has changed any, but I'm thinking that most of these are probably going to stay right around 7.5 is what I'm seeing now.
Yeah. It's around 7 though. I did update these
over
graphics,
and under
so.
is set right around 46.5. Look, Mason, I'll cut right to the chase. Tennessee has had trouble winning games on the road under Josh Heupel. That's something that we talked about earlier this week, and something that I continue to look at and consider whenever trying to predict this game. But that's kind of an intangible thing. That's kind of a thing that's taking place off the field. So I'm just going to set that to this. That is present, and that is an issue, and it has been an issue. Not saying it will be this Saturday, but it has been an issue. And so we'll kind of set that to the side and maybe kind of talk about that later. But this game to me comes down to which team can hit explosive plays offensively. And obviously, either team has running backs that could hit a home run at any moment. They're home run hitters on both sides. Ohio State particularly has 2. Tennessee, I would say, has more, just one, Dylan Sampson. But those 3 guys can take it to the house any given play, right? But that being put aside, I think these offenses are going to have to figure out a way to get the ball over the top of these defenses and hit a couple of big plays. I don't expect this to be a high-scoring football game at all. So the team that can hit maybe 2 of those, I feel like is going to set themselves up really well in this football game. There's other elements here, Mason, that I think are important and stuff that we're going to kind of address here in a second when we bring up some of the comments that we've received on the channel this week talking about this game, such as the weather. That's something that we're going to talk about here in a minute. And I think that weather situation, it depends on how you look at it. I think it applies to both teams, or you could say it's a moot point. We'll kind of get to that in a second. But as far as schematically, Tennessee offense versus Ohio State defense and, flipped, who has the edge in this game? And what do you think is the keys to victory here? We both know how good these defenses are. They're absolutely outstanding. I think Tennessee has got a little bit deeper defensive line. I think that Ohio State's defense on the back end is a little bit better than Tennessee's, right? Mm-hmm. So what gives here?
Yeah, I like Tennessee's secondary. I really like Jermod McCoy. I saw him get beat a couple of times against Georgia. It wasn't a lot, but the times that he got beat against Georgia was probably as many times as he had been beaten all season up to that point combined. And so to me, it does kind of make me wonder a little bit about his position going up against noticeably better receivers. I think this will be the best test that these secondary players have had all season long. But I think that the defensive line, to your point, is so deep that it really makes these secondary players look that much better. And I think that that'll continue going up against a beat up Ohio State offensive line. I mean, left tackle out, center out. I'm kind of wondering if Tennessee is just going to be all over Will Howard, who is a decent runner. He's not someone who, even though he's a good runner, I don't really see Will Howard as someone who just kind of escapes and flushes out of the pocket a ton and is able to step up when pressure comes and all that. I mean, look, not knocking Will Howard at all. I think he's a fine player. I'm just wondering how disruptive this Tennessee defensive line can be. I really feel confident in that aspect of their game, and we've seen throughout college football all season long that the defensive lines that are the better defensive lines typically win the football game. And to me, as good as Ohio State's defensive line is, and they are good, I think Tennessee's is better. And we saw some comments throughout this week from Ohio State fans saying Tennessee's defensive line is not that good, and their defense isn't as good as Ohio State's, and all this other stuff. I'm here to tell you, I mean, if you watch the games, Tennessee's defensive line is, I think, the best in the country. I mean, as a defensive line alone, they're so deep. They're so good at stopping the run, at getting pressure on the quarterback. They don't have a ton of sacks, but they create pressure, especially when James Pierce is healthy and he's able to cut loose. To me, that's the key to victory for Tennessee. Get the pressure up front, take the pressure off of the back end of the defense, going up against what is, I think, undoubtedly the best wide receiving group that they face all year. And then for Tennessee on defense, that's the way that they succeed. I don't think that they're going to have an issue with the running game, Mark. I really don't. They haven't all season long. It doesn't matter who they face. I think Georgia probably ran the ball the best against them, and they ended up just over 100 yards. Nothing crazy there. Ohio State surprisingly has struggled to run the football for most of the season. I don't think that they've, and I think Ohio State fans would agree that given the amount of hype that we put on Ohio State and the running game on Chip Kelly's offense with these two phenomenal running backs and Will Howard at quarterback, we just assumed that they would run the football better than they have to this point. I don't think it gets any better in this game. However, if they're able to get something established on the ground game, I like Will Howard and his experience over Nico Iamaleava. And, I think Nico's got a higher ceiling, and I think that's pretty obvious. I'm worried about him in this cold environment. This is going to be the coldest game he's ever played in. And I know people are trying not to make a big deal of the weather and things like that, but Nico's a guy who came from California. He didn't grow up in Tennessee, right? I know it's a 4 or 5 hour bus ride from Tennessee to Ohio State. There's not a ton of difference in the weather, few degrees. I get it, but Nico's not from that, and he hasn't played in something like this. When he goes to grip the football, it's going to be a little bit different. I do give the edge at quarterback to Will Howard. I just think that when I look at the playmakers on both sides of the football, I think Dylan Sampson is the best athlete on the field when he's on the field. And to me, I think that Sampson is going to be the reason that Tennessee wins this football game.
Let's look at some of the comments that we received this week. This was one of the most interesting comment sections of all the videos that we had did earlier this week, and I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on some of these because they were certainly interesting. From at Shroom SPLS, Shrooms, please. Okay, cool, man. Ryan Day's ego lost the Michigan game, not the scheme or talent on the field. And this person's responding to what we had talked about in that video. We had talked about Ohio State, obviously, in that Michigan game, taking the L there at home. He said he simply wanted to prove they could beat Michigan at their own brand of ball, and it backfired. And look, guys, I think there is a little bit of truth to that. Now, I'm not saying that Ohio State all of a sudden is going to get into the playoff and grow their wings, and all of a sudden they're the best offense in the country or anything. But I do think that there is a little bit of truth to that. Ryan Day has got a stubbornness to him, and there was an element in that game of, we're gonna cram it down their throat. We're the more physical team. We're not soft. Everybody's called us soft, and we ain't that way. Look what we're, and I'm sure Ryan Day, being a confident guy that he is, probably was telling recruits, watch this, we're about to bully their ass, and it didn't work out, right? It just didn't work out. And I think that there's a lot of outside noise for this Ohio State program, Mason. I think there's a ton of noise. There was a ton of money spent on this roster, and that's everybody's favorite talking point. This is the best team that money can buy, and they can't win a big game. And so I'm very interested to see how all that stuff. I feel like the pressure is on Ohio State here, and Tennessee is the team that hasn't been here a whole heck of a lot over the last few years. And yet I feel like all the pressure is on Ohio State and this coaching staff. And whenever the pressure was on Will Howard in that last game against Michigan, he didn't do very well with that, because I don't think that he's a quarterback that you're wanting to put the game on his shoulders. He's not that guy. He's a game manager who's meant to get the ball around to all the playmakers that are first, second, third round NFL talents on that offense, which is a lot of them at the skill positions. Um, so what I just thought that was interesting. At the bottom of this comment, it says it's going to be a great game, and I think either OSU blows them out or Tennessee wins a close one. Which I feel like there's a lot of different, there's a lot of territory in between there. But Tennessee is not in the habit of losing close, so if they're going down, it will be obvious early. Well, I mean, Tennessee lost what 17-14 or something to Arkansas this year, so I mean
Yeah.
they lost a close game. It was something like that, to that effect.
Yeah.
Thought this was an interesting comment. Any thoughts on that, Mason?
Yeah, I think that he's onto something there with Ohio State trying to beat Michigan kind of at their own game. You got to remember, when these coaches game plan and they start doing installs for the week heading into for a week heading into the game, there's kind of no going back. I mean, once you install that system and that play style for that specific week, I mean, you've got some opportunities for flexibility and whatnot. But I mean, if you practice those plays, you try to go outside of those plays, and you're going to see it on the field. You're not going to see the players be as sharp and whatnot. So, I mean, I mean, I think it's all speculation, but I think you might be onto something as far as like, a minor conspiracy in a sense that, that Ryan Day was too egotistical in this game. I mean,
We'll
yeah,
never know a definitive
it's
answer to
interesting.
this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, but it is interesting, and it's something that has crossed my mind because it did seem like there was some outside influence on the game plan. And you're right, man. So once you install something early in the week, I mean, that's your game plan. I mean, it's really, really tough to change gears. You only get so much time with your guys. You know, you only get so many practices and so many hours together. So, um, that's an interesting thought. Moving on to the next comment here. Among many, there's a bunch of comments on this video. As you can see, that's the thumbnail from the video we did earlier this week. You can find that on our page. Go check it out. Go yell at these people in the comment section. You're more than welcome to do that. They put it out there. It's out in the public, so go for it. At Anthony Waldington 1173, thank you for watching. I really do appreciate it. It's obvious he doesn't know too much about the Ohio State receivers. I don't know which he was talking to, or just if our channel is a male, or what. But look, we all know about Ohio State and their receivers. I mean, I feel like that's the most obvious approach whenever you start talking about the Ohio State offense. But that hasn't really been the identity of this team this year. Those guys are awesome. Egbuka, Smith, all among others, Carnell Tate. Those guys have been awesome, no doubt about it. They're awesome players. They're going to be really good on Sundays as well. If we've learned anything about the wide receivers that come out of this program, it's a wide receiver factory. But the problem is the wide receivers won't be lining up at guard and tackle and center and blocking. And not to mention, if the wide receivers had it their way, every play would be called a passing play. And that's not what's going on in Ohio State right now, and that's not the identity of this team. Is it possible that Jeremiah Smith catches a couple of big touchdowns in this game and helps win the game for Ohio State? It is certainly possible. There is no doubt about that. And that is a factor in this game, and they're going to play a role in this football game. But if you're expecting Will Howard to go out here and have a C.J. Stroud-like performance like C.J. Stroud did against the Georgia Bulldogs, in the playoffs a couple years ago, everybody knows what I'm talking about, the Midnight Miracle. I just don't think he's that guy. So it's going to be more of a team approach. It's not going to be one man for this Ohio State offense or two wide receivers, or they're going to have to be able to establish some type of run game. And because if you're if you're going to rely on long developing passing plays in this game over and over and over again, where to the point where it's predictable, Tennessee's got a pass rush that's going to be able to get to you, and it's going to be a problem eventually. What are your thoughts on this, Mason? You don't know anything about the Ohio State wide receivers. Did you look them up real quick?
Yeah, that's what I was doing while you were talking. Got a full scouting report. Now, I mean, look, I follow the recruiting pretty closely. It's been tougher since we started this show, and since I've been kind of more dedicated to teams as a whole. I think my bandwidth has run thin a little bit, so I don't get as much into the recruiting like I used to. But make no doubt about it. I mean, I definitely recall some of these guys coming up and their the recruiting battles that took place and whatnot. I think the world of Jeremiah Smith. I think he is kind of the next Marvin Harrison. You know what I mean? I've got him a little bit ahead of Ryan Williams right now. And I think he's a little bit more put together right now as a receiver, a little bit more polished. But yeah, I mean, look, this is
you don't know an explanation for this comment, Mason. I mean,
yeah, this is somebody trying to cherry pick a thought here. And I mean, I think the Ohio, like I said, I mean, I just talked about how I think this is the best wide receiving group that Tennessee's faced all year. So, man, I definitely believe that it's the best receiving group almost everybody has faced all year whenever they face Ohio State, and that's continuous.
We don't, and obviously that comment was from somebody that hasn't watched this channel a whole heck of a lot, because we don't put on any colored tinted glasses on this show. I mean, we call it like we see it. We haven't been afraid to pick against our own team on this show, and have done it successfully, and have predicted it unsuccessfully. And anytime we're wrong, we're going to be right back on this channel. We don't give a damn. We ain't hiding like most of y'all do in the comment section. Whenever you're wrong, you disappear for a little bit. Another comment that I thought was funny on this one: I hope Davy Crockett plants the Power T flag on the 50-yard line after the Vols win. Be careful with that. I don't know if they've.
Woo.
Yeah, those are fighting words apparently, and apparently the coaching staff at Ohio State will just let them fight you over that. But with that being said, I don't know if all of y'all have heard, but there's been legislation introduced to make this some type of crime or I believe a felony. So Tennessee boys, you better be careful. That them Ohio officers would love to arrest them some Tennessee boys. If the legislation was passed that quickly, I doubt it. We all know how slow our government is and how shitty they are.
Well, I mean, we know that they're not afraid to use pepper spray. So just know if you're going to run out there with that flag, you're going to be getting maced. So just be prepared. Have your gas mask ready. Like that would be some shit. They go out there with gas mask and plant the flag and run off. That would be something.
Yeah, if you're gonna plant it, you better plant it and run. That's all I got to say. Because apparently that is worth fighting over, which I disagree with. And here's kind of the final point on this one, and this is kind of the one I wanted to finish up on, Mason. And I have an interesting take on this, so I'm interested. We've already kind of heard your thoughts on this a little bit, but. Mia Khan won. Thanks for watching, Mia Khan. I appreciate it. Says it's cold everywhere, isn't it? Like, what sports-minded individual would think that weather is going to be a factor in this? If you can't play in the cold, go home and put a heated blanket on. Now, I like the fiery sentiment of this thought. Don't be a P word, right? Go get out there and do what you got to do. It is going to be very cold for this game in Columbus. There's no doubt about that. But for me to sit and think about this, does that play into Ohio State's favor? And I think that there's going to be, in some ways maybe, but in some ways maybe not. Mason, Ohio State has played almost exclusively noon games this year. They
Yeah.
haven't played night games in the cold. They don't practice out in the cold. Ohio State has some of the best facilities in this country. They're practicing indoors all the time, just like a bunch of the rest of these teams. And so, with that being said, I mean, I can't even remember the last time that Ohio State had a night game at the Shoe. And they're not going to be getting them. I mean, that's, um, with CBS and the way they're kind of infiltrated the Big Ten there. Um, you know, night games are going to be harder and harder to come by because every time you have a good game, they're going to snatch it up for noon kickoff or they're going to snatch it up for the CBS game of the week at 3:30. And that's the time slots that Ohio State has played at the majority of this season. I think it was 7 weekends in a row Ohio State had played at noon, something like that. So I don't think either team has an advantage with it being freezing cold. Both of these offenses are geared towards cold play, right? Run the football, get behind a big offensive line. I don't think there's a big advantage for either team here. They both have to play in the same weather. What are your thoughts on that? That's just my opinion. I mean, you're right with Nico, but I know that there's guys for Ohio State that aren't from Ohio. There's a bunch of dudes on that team that are from Florida, California. They're from all over the place, and they're not necessarily, grandfathered into this cold weather climate or have a ton of experience playing in it. Although it was fairly cold whenever Ohio State hosted Michigan, but not as cold as it's going to be this coming up Saturday. I'm hearing it's going to be in the teens. What are your thoughts? And then we'll kind of close this thing out and give our predictions on this one and move on.
Yeah, well, I mean, Jeremiah Smith, the guy that we don't know anything about, he's from South Florida. And, I mean, he's not from Columbus. He's not used to this environment. It's probably the coldest game he's ever played in, too. So if you want to compare playmakers, I think that's completely fair. Everybody's on the same field. We're not talking about Vikings versus Samoans. Like these are people that live in the continental U.S. for the most part, and I just don't think that there's going to be that much of a discrepancy in the level of gameplay between these two. I think it's going to be mostly even and matched, and I think that the game is going to be evenly matched. I really feel like this. If Tennessee wins this game, it'll be Josh Heupel's greatest win of his career so far. Not just because it's a playoff game, but it's because it's Ohio State on the road. And I think a really good Ohio State team. I really like this defense a lot. I think it is potentially the best defense in the country, and has been one of the most consistent defenses in the country. When I look at a team like Georgia, I look at their defense, and we saw what they did on the road against Texas, and I think, well, that's a ceiling that not many teams can touch. Not many teams can match Georgia's ceiling as a defense, but Ohio State is almost there, and they do it consistently. And I think that's been the most impressive thing about this defense. But like I said earlier, I'm looking at the playmaker for Tennessee, which isn't Nico, and not this year at least. It's not Nico. It's Dylan Sampson, and I don't think that there is anyone on Ohio State's offense, and I know offense doesn't play offense. I get all that, but when I'm looking at the team's abilities to score points, assuming that these defenses are pretty similar, at least in their run defense, I like Sampson's ability to run the football more. I think this game stays low scoring. I like the underplay here, actually, a pretty good bit. Under 46.5 is the total there. And but I like Tennessee to win this game outright. I like Tennessee on the money line. I think it was around plus 250. Don't quote me on that, but I think there's really good value in that. And this is one that Tennessee could definitely get. On the flip side, if a team were to run away with it, I do think it would be Ohio State. But I like Tennessee in a close game here. I think that they learned a lot in the Arkansas loss, and you could say the same thing about Ohio State learning a lot in the Oregon loss. But I think Nico will have a better understanding of managing the clock. Whoever gets the ball last in this one wins, in my opinion. And if I'm going to have to pick a side, I'm gonna side with Tennessee on this one, because I mean we all love an underdog story, right? But give me Tennessee to win this one, and definitely cover the 7.5.
I think Ohio State's going to need some more of that special teams magic, right? I think they're going to need their defense to play well, and I think that they probably will. But I think Tennessee's defense is going to play well also in this game. I think this is a low-scoring game, Mason. I told somebody earlier this week that it would not surprise me to see like a 17-10 outcome in this thing, like something crazy low, like Alabama LSU from the 2000s, earlier in the 2000s type game. Um, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see that, especially if we see some other type of weather move in, right? Maybe some snow. That there is a possibility of that. So, if there is precipitation, I do think that the weather will have more of an effect on the game, obviously. So, but with that being said, I like everything you're saying there. I certainly like Tennessee plus the points here. I saw somebody in the comment section earlier put that they're taking Ohio State -6.5. Maybe they already had that bet, but I haven't seen that number anywhere. Y'all, all let us know in the comment section. What's your best bet on this game? Over, under, spread, all that stuff. Let us know what you think the score of this one is going to be. I'm taking Tennessee to win this thing. I think it's going to be a real close game. I could see 17-10. I could see 17-13. I could see 17-14. I mean, I think this thing is close, low scoring. And most of the time I'm siding with the home team. But again, I feel like Tennessee has got something to prove here. They're going to come in here with a chip on their shoulder. And I feel like Ohio State is going to play with a lot of pressure. And for that reason, I think Tennessee is able to hit a couple of big plays and stretch that Ohio State defense out a bit. So give me Tennessee. We're on the same page there. God, my dog is getting on my nerves in here, dude. Jesus Christ. All right. Over here. Nora, stop. For the love of God, dude. Jesus Christ. Sitting there licking something and just, it sounds disgusting. I have a horse of a dog in here. Freaking, y'all don't know. Great Pyrenees are absolutely huge, and it's like a horse in my house. All right, let's keep it going, guys. That was a good one. I've been wanting to talk about that one. Everybody's been really, really excited about that game. All right, let's talk about Indiana, Notre Dame. I think we're pretty much caught up on the comments. I put some of them on the screen there as we went through. Y'all let us know on this Indiana Notre Dame game what you're thinking here. Let me make sure that I've got this correct. That one's still at 7, and the over-under is at 51.5 at this point. So let's correct that real quick, and we'll get started. Hey, and if y'all are watching, hit that like button for us real quick. It helps us out tremendously.
I mean, there are some 51s out there. I'm seeing 7, 7.5, 51, 51.5. I mean, depends on what you want there, but
yeah. All right, let's jump into this thing. Indiana Hoosiers are going on the road to Notre Dame. This is a game that I feel like is a little bit overdue, Mason. I mean, we haven't seen these two teams within the same state face off against each other a whole heck of a lot. I believe it's one time ever, which I find extremely odd.
One time,
or
so
one time
it's been
recently.
Twice. I heard recently. I think it was Mr. McGee, Ryan McGee, on ESPN said that they faced twice since 1958. Before that, there were several games. I think the first time they played was like 1878 or something crazy. But yeah, two historic programs in the same state. I think it was like 20-something times they played in total, but only twice since 1958, which is incredibly surprising to me.
To be as close as they are, it doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense to me. I think that is obviously something that has generated a whole heck of a lot of conversation. This game, to me, it really comes down to the lines of scrimmage. And, I hate to be I hate to be so plain Jane about it, Mason, but Indiana has had a remarkable season. Curt Cignetti coming over from James Madison brought a ton of players with him. We all know about what he's done in the transfer portal and the transformation that he's began at Indiana, and it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And that team deserves some serious kudos. Obviously, if making the 12-team college football playoff wasn't enough kudos, I don't know what is. One of 12 teams in the country that is in a win or go home for a national championship situation. So Indiana has done a remarkable job. Curt Cignetti has done a remarkable job. Curtis Rourke is somebody that deserves mentioning, the quarterback there on that offense. But it's that Indiana offensive line facing that Notre Dame defensive line, and the opposite of that, Notre Dame offensive line versus this Indiana D line. How does that matchup look? We haven't seen Indiana face off with a ton of teams that have NFL talent sprinkled all throughout the roster, right? And the one time that we've really seen it this year against Ohio State, it was ugly. Now, did Indiana's defense play bad in that game? I wouldn't say that their defense played bad. I wouldn't say that. I think that they did fine. Offense did not play well. They weren't given a ton of chances, so you have to kind of keep that in mind as well. But in no world was 200 yards total offense any good. That's not good. So the offense didn't play particularly well in that football game, but it was the special teams blunders that were the absolute just what took the knees out from under this Indiana team in that football game. It was terrible mistakes repeated over and over again that really just buried Indiana in that game. So how can Indiana avoid those types of situations, right? You're obviously going to have to play better on special teams. That's number one. But can you run the football on this front for Notre Dame? There was some games there where Howard Cross was a little banged up. He should be 100% for this one, or as close as he's going to get to it this season. That's what I'm most interested in. That offensive line didn't look particularly great against Ohio State. Whenever they did get their chances and had the football. Maybe Indiana got a little bit out of sync in that game. They got behind. They had to do some things that they didn't want to do, abandon the game plan a bit. You can say all those things, but they got whooped. And Notre Dame has the ability defensively to whoop people. So that's a big part of this game. Offensively, for both of these teams, or offensively, I should say, for Notre Dame, we all know what Notre Dame wants to do. They want to run the football. And I've seen some comments in the comment section, Indiana talking about, they're one-dimensional. We're going to be able to, take away what they want to do, and our offense is more dynamic. You think that everybody else in the country hasn't seen what Notre Dame wants to do offensively? Everybody else has seen it. Everybody knows that. But taking away that element of their offense is really, really tough. It's easier said than done. Notre Dame is the type of offense where there's not a whole lot of guessing game. Now, you don't know who's going to take off and run with the football. I'm not saying that. But you know that overall that's what this team is looking to do. They're looking to run it. And they don't mind that you know that. And they're still going to run at you. So can that Indiana front stand up and get stops against the run game and force Notre Dame into some obvious passing situations? Because we all know how Riley Leonard has struggled to throw the football. It's been a thing that's gone on for multiple years now. It's not new. It's not, he's got maybe a shoulder injury or something, and he's not. No, he's just not great in the passing game at this point. And I don't think that the wide receiver room for Notre Dame is particularly dynamic. Maybe a step better than last year, but still not particularly dynamic, I wouldn't say. So can Notre Dame slow this thing down? Because I don't think they're going to hit a bunch of explosive plays in the pass game. I just don't think that that's going to happen in this game for Notre Dame. So I think the path to victory here for Notre Dame is to slow this game down, limit possessions, play solid special teams and defense, and run the football and stay patient doing that. Maybe you got to hit one or two big plays in this game, but again, I feel like this is going to be a lower scoring game than what the total is showing here. I think this one it comes in under 51.5. A lot of it's going to depend on, like I said, which Indiana team shows up on the line of scrimmage. The outlier seems to be Ohio State game. We'll see which one shows up in this situation at Touchdown Jesus. We'll all be watching there on Friday at 8 p.m. What do you think about this one, Mason?
Yeah, I mean, going back to my point in the early preview, to me, if Indiana stays on schedule and is able to move the sticks and score on most of their drives, which they've done at a pretty tremendous rate throughout the year, I think they win this game. To me, when you look at the blunder that happened at Ohio State, and I won't spend too much time on this point because I already made it earlier in the week, but the two special teams issues, as soon as, I mean, Indiana was in that game for the first drive. They're up 7-0. Defense was looking good. And then Ohio State, that they got into a 3rd and 35 and converted on 4th down, which was crazy. Got some momentum. Then they get the dropped punt and then the punt return for a touchdown, and all of a sudden they're up big, and it just seemed like they couldn't be stopped from then on. But Indiana just looked completely out of sync at that point, and you saw, like I said, the first drive you saw that they could do it against an Ohio State defense if they stayed on schedule. To me, that's the biggest question: is can Indiana stay on schedule, or if they get off schedule a little bit, can they bring it back? Because we never saw them come back against Ohio State. Notre Dame's defense has been really opportunistic, and they're turning the ball over at a really impressive rate. They're ranked 5th in the country in interceptions and 20th in the country in fumbles. But then you look on the flip side, Indiana's done a great job at protecting the football. They're 10th in the country in interceptions given up and 11th in the country in fumbles given up. So to me, that's going to be really the difference in the game. At least for Indiana, if they're going to win this football game, they just need to not turn the ball over, stay on schedule, stay ahead of the sticks. And then to me, they do have the better playmaker at quarterback. I know Riley Leonard is great, as a runner. I don't really care for him as a passer. I think Curtis Rourke is kind of that guy that you want, who can hit the deep throws, who can hit a receiver in the flats and let him go. To me, the offense, because of Curtis Rourke for Indiana, is much more complete than the offense for Notre Dame. Notre Dame, however, has the best running back in this football game, and it's not even close. Jeremiah Love is an absolute stud, doesn't get the recognition he deserves. I think that he could be a factor in this game, but we've seen Indiana's defense be the number one defense in the country all season long, at least at stopping. Sorry, the number one defense against the run in the country all season long. They are first in the country, giving up 70.8 yards per game. That is extremely impressive, even considering the fact that the only real teams that they've played with the pulse have been Ohio State and Michigan. Both of those teams pride themselves on being able to run the football, but I would say that they are falling short of expectations this season. But to me, regardless of that, I think that Indiana has a really stout or rush defense. I think you continue to see that in this football game, which kind of makes Notre Dame have a little bit of stress here, and ultimately could lead to their offense struggling a good bit. But to me, what it's going to come down to in this football game is special teams and turnovers. And I do think that Notre Dame is going to be able to get some turnovers in this football game. I would be surprised if this was a clean game. I'll put it that way, Mark.
Let's look at some of the comments on the video from earlier this week. At Irish Dave 761, thank you for watching, Irish Dave. I do appreciate it. He says Indiana is a good football team. Can they win? Absolutely. Will they? No. Too much love and Price running the ball. Notre Dame pulls away late and will face Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. Notre Dame 38-20. I saw a video from one Notre Dame fan. Mason told us that we didn't talk about Price, so he knew immediately that we have not watched any Notre Dame all year. So he knew because we didn't say Price's name by name, and by which Notre Dame doesn't put their names on their jerseys, by the way. So I don't think they want us to know their name. But with that being said, we don't know anything because we didn't say somebody's name. This was an interesting comment right here. We'll just move on past that retarded comment that we just read, or that I was just talking about. What running QBs has IU faced? Nothing like Leonard, and I thought that was an interesting point. They don't have a ton of experience facing off against a running quarterback. Somebody commented, I don't even know, Sliberdis, 1996. Yeah, thanks for watching. He says Dylan Raiola. And then the MU Hawk 1122 replied and said, wait, what? Raiola has negative 68 yards rushing this year. Leonard has 721 yards rushing and 14 touchdowns. That's where the conversation ended. There's points being made there, right? How does Indiana handle this? We know what they're going to try to do. They're going to try to bring all these defenders down and leave. It's going to leave some defenders for Indiana on an island against these wide receivers. And I'm not saying I don't like, that it's a bad matchup or anything, but as an offense, that's the matchup you're looking for. You're looking for one-on-ones. And can Leonard hit some of those plays in a big game like this? We're going to find out. This is the biggest game we've ever seen Riley Leonard play in. No doubt about it. Can he hit one or two and be able to back this defense up a little bit? I think it's a fair question. Until he can do that, I think you're going to see Indiana stack the line and they're going to spy this quarterback. I think that's pretty clear until Notre Dame proves that Indiana needs to do something else.
Yeah, totally, and I think it is a really fair point. So it's one that I really haven't considered as far as Indiana facing a running quarterback.
You guys comment on the videos, y'all. We learn stuff from you guys. We like talking with you guys. Thank you.
No, that's a great take, honestly, and I guess in this day and age in modern college football, you just expect teams to have faced running quarterbacks and good running quarterbacks with how prevalent they are in today's day and age, but apparently not in the Big Ten. That's actually a really good point, and I don't think that there are many rushing quarterbacks like Riley Leonard, first of all, but to me, I still like Indiana's defensive line in this matchup, and their front seven in this matchup. They play such sound football that I do think that they'll be able to kind of box in Riley Leonard. He's going to have to get creative, and this offense is going to have to get creative. And I think whoever wins this game is going to have to take a few shots downfield. In that case, I like Curtis Work more than Riley Leonard, if I'm honest, but maybe the downfield plays or the large chunk plays, I should say, are to Mitchell Evans or Love or Price. That maybe it's a little bit more short games where they run after the catch for a decent amount. Who really knows in this one? I can't wait for this game though on Friday.
Last comment on this one that I have on here. There was a bunch of comments, so y'all feel free to go check out this video from earlier this week. Comment back at these people. You're more than welcome to do so. I won't even try to say that name there. Thanks for watching. I do appreciate it. Indiana has a more dynamic offense, and their defense matches up well with Notre Dame's run game. And statistically, this makes 100% sense. If we were just looking at statistics, it would be a really, really good matchup for Indiana. And it very well could be. I'm not saying that it's not going to be a good matchup for Indiana. I think this ends up being a close game. But you know, uh, this person predicts Indiana wins 21-10. That goes right along with what we were saying with the low scoring game here. Um, Indiana's going to have to match up well against the run game if they're going to have a chance in this one, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
plain and simple. I mean, you look, guys, when we did conference championship week, I don't know if y'all realize this, but pretty much just about every single team that won the rushing battle won the game. Like, other than Oregon, Penn State, that was the only outlier there. Every other conference championship game, whoever won the rushing battle won the conference championship.
Yep.
I think these first round playoff games are going to be eerily similar to that, Mason. I think whichever team can run the football better, especially in these cold weather games, right? Whichever team has got the advantage running the ball, and that's, mind you, protecting the football. Turnovers obviously could kill that, and that's kind of what happened to Penn State, to be honest with you. But who can run the ball better? I think they've got themselves a good chance to win the game, whoever does that. And I think Notre Dame's got an advantage there. So, with all that being said, let's give our final predictions on this one, and we'll kind of close this one out as we get in closer and closer to Friday. I can't wait to see this one at 8 o'clock. Y'all let us know in the comment section, what's your prediction for this one? What do you think's going down? Some of you already have, and we do appreciate that. And hit that thumbs up button and hit the subscribe button if you're new to the channel. Welcome to First and Long. I like the home team here, Mason. We already kind of. I feel like the home teams have an advantage here in this situation, no doubt about it. College football home field advantage is different than NFL and a lot of other sports in general. And I think that it's going to go a long way. Now, Indiana fans don't have far to travel to get to this game, but you know how much I'm sure these tickets are through the roof. They got to be. Notre Dame fans, are diehard, right? And they're in the playoff, and they're going to want these tickets, and it's going to be a really, really, really good environment there. I assume it's going to be very cold. Give me Notre Dame, though. Give me Notre Dame in this one. As far as like betting purposes, I feel like a lot of these games are going to be close. So I wouldn't be upset with anybody taking Indiana +7 in this one, and thinking that it could be a 3-point game. But the more obvious play to me is the under. I think this is a really low scoring football game, and I think Notre Dame can win it. I think I'm leaning Notre Dame -7, but definitely taking Notre Dame straight up in this one, and definitely going to consider placing a bet on the under. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm pretty much completely with you here. Like I said earlier, I think this game comes down um, to turnovers really, and I think that Notre Dame has done a better job of getting those turnovers. Indiana's been a little bit better at protecting the football, but I like Notre Dame's ability to go out and create turnovers. And if you're going to compare a defense that creates turnovers versus an offense that is good at limiting the turnovers, I'll put money on the defense being able to get that done. Outside of that, I think it's a pretty even matchup as far as both offenses. I like the playmakers on defense for Notre Dame a little bit more, and that's also kind of why I'm thinking that the turnovers will have something to do with this game. I got Notre Dame winning. I'm taking. There's a 7.5 out there, so I'm leaning towards Indiana plus the points. But I think for the best bet for this line right here is the under 51.5. I really think that this is going to be a defensive sort of stalemate.
Absolutely, it's going to be a good one. Can't wait to see it. All right, guys. Let's get.
I just gotta say, this comment taken out of context is just kind of like no, no, thank you. Not interested. Thanks, Sam, but no thanks.
This is a good joke right here. This is a good Notre Dame joke. Joe Long said, "You can't put a price on love."
Yeah,
I like that.
That's a good. There's got to be a T-shirt out there with some NIL collective for Notre Dame.
That needs to be a sign behind the game day desk. right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You gotta. That's a good one. That's a good one. All right, let's keep it going. Already see a comment on Texas. You're bringing in that kind of money, I guess. Thank you. Let you pick your schedule. Shots fired. Don't talk about Greg Sankey, peanut butter posse. You get in trouble for that. Ask Kirby. All right, let's jump into this last one here, or these last couple, and then we're gonna get into some housekeeping things as far as bracket, as far as transfer portal coaching stuff. Just real quick at the end of the show. Thank y'all for watching. Hit that like button for us real quick, and let's go here. Clemson on the road at Texas, headed to Austin. 11.5-point favorite are the Longhorns. Over-under is set at 51.5. Texas obviously coming off the loss there to Georgia in the SEC championship, heartbreaker style overtime. Clemson put together a heartbreaker of their own and were able to kick a field goal at the last second to beat SMU, who staged their own comeback in that football game. I'll cut right to the point because we broke this game down earlier this week, and if you guys missed it, feel free to go and check that out. We had put together all the stats and things, and I'll put some of that stuff on your screen now so that you can look at it at your leisure there. But can this Texas offense open it up a bit against this Clemson defense, Mason? I think that's one of the biggest questions. Texas offense has been in a bit of a slump if you really kind of look at it. Going back to the Texas A&M game, scored 0 points in the second half of that one, only scored 19 against Georgia, played Georgia twice this year and scored 34 points total in those games. So I feel like the question has to be asked, is this Texas offense going to be more like what we saw in the beginning of the season, or is it going to be more like what we've seen here coming in late? Because when we start talking playoffs and things like that, you typically really, doesn't matter what sport it is, you ask who's coming in hot, who's coming in playing winning football, and I haven't seen Texas really doing that here lately. We've seen some close games with some pretty average competition that Texas has faced off against this year. There's been tons of talk about the schedule that Texas was given coming into the SEC this season. It was very, very easy. Now, Texas is going to, kind of right that ship next year. They're going to be going, I believe, to Ohio State to start the season next year. So I'm already interested in that matchup, and we're not even to the offseason yet, so I'll have to hold my horses on that one. But what Texas team is going to show up here? This is not a battle-tested team. The two times that they've been battle-tested, they've lost. They barely beat Vanderbilt, and we've seen some others, blowouts where they blew out teams that were reeling, dealing with injuries, or just flat out weren't ranked and weren't any good. Clemson has kind of been the same situation, Mason. Clemson's best win just came last week. Do they have momentum? Will this propel them forward? And can Clemson take something away from that offense? I think is the biggest question. And I'm not even mentioning Texas's defense, which is the strength of their team. But can Clemson's defense take away the run game and make Texas one-dimensional? I think that's a big part of this game. They got to take something away, and I think they can take away the run game. But then it begs the question, you go back to that Clemson offense, how are they going to score on this Texas defense? That's probably the biggest question here. This Texas defense is legit. It's built from the back end forward, so I would consider that secondary group to be one of the best in the country. I think the linebacker group is really good, especially with Anthony Hill on the field. And then I think the defensive line is pretty average as far as SEC teams go, which it's a good year for defensive lines in the SEC. So, take that with a grain of salt. But I think Texas got a pretty average defensive line, better on the edges than on the interior. But overall, it's been a really, really, really good defense for Steve Kwiatkowski and the Texas Longhorns this year. I'm interested to see how Clemson's going to be able to move the football or score. We haven't seen Clemson run the ball good lately because of Phil Mafah's injury. Is he closer to 100%? That's a big question for me as well. I'm leaning Texas in this one, Mason. What are your thoughts? Hey, I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. I completely agree with you, Mark. Looking at Texas's defense, this is a defensive-led program. I mean, without a doubt. They don't. I feel like Texas doesn't get talked about as far as their defense, like we talk about Ohio State, like we talk about Tennessee and some pockets of the country, I guess. But they are every bit as good, in my opinion. And it really, and we were talking about this the other day, Mark, but when you look at at Texas's defensive backs, that's been the most impressive group for this unit, and it's because we had a lot of questions going into the season because they were losing a lot. They were bringing in a lot of transfers. Andrew Makuba comes in, a couple of others come in. Williams is down at safety, and so considering everything, I think that this secondary group has been probably the best secondary in football that at least of the contenders, of the 12 team playoffs. I think that this secondary group for Texas is the best of the bunch, and that can take you a long way. Going up against Clemson, I really feel like Clemson is going to struggle to the tune of like not scoring a touchdown this entire game. I think that this Texas defense is the best that Clemson has faced all year. We saw them against Georgia only put up 3 points, and I think Texas at times has played better as a defense than Georgia has. So if we're saying that they're even similar to Georgia, and of course I know full well that Clemson has gotten better as an offense as the season's gone on. Well, I'd say Texas has gotten better as the season's gone on as a defense as well. And I don't see Clemson, like you said, being able to score on Texas. If they do score, I think Clemson's going to be getting some defensive scores or special teams, field goals, things like that. I got Clemson putting up a goose egg in this one as far as touchdowns go. I'm not saying it's going to be a complete shutout, but I don't think this offense has the firepower to score on Texas, and especially at Texas. I think that this is going to be the home game that Texas fans wish the Georgia game was. This is the one that they come out and win and throttle the opponent. I like Texas in this one pretty big. I would actually take Texas at the minus 11.5 in this one.
I'm interested to see kind of what, and let me get on the right comment here. I'm interested to see what Texas's thought process is. Are they able to come out here and treat this like a business move, right? Are they able to come out here and be motivated and block out the noise? This is a prideful bunch we're talking about here. And there are a lot about, it seems like a lot of outside noise kind of influences this team, Mason. I still see a lot of Texas fans complaining about reffing in the SEC championship game. And, it was the same complaint the last time the game before that they lost. Can Texas own up? That's kind of where I'm at. Like, you need to clear all your head mentally about, so-and-so, a ref don't want you to win a game or whatever. That was a bunch of bullcrap. I mean, y'all can read the comment on the screen here. It's one thing that I will take away from it. It says Texas play calling in the red zone is horrible. Well, here's my thoughts. When you can't run the ball, it makes the red zone a lot harder. Mm-hmm. And Texas has ran the ball for less than 100 yards against Georgia in both games that they've played them combined. So you want to point at something, and not to mention, can we just all get to a point where we can agree that Georgia was just a bad matchup for Texas? I mean, we talked about this on the phone this week. I mean, Ole Miss is a bad matchup for Georgia. We saw that earlier this year, and we talked about it on the phone. If Georgia and Ole Miss played again, I don't know that Georgia would be able to beat Ole Miss if they played again. I don't know that that's the case. I think it's a bad matchup. Would it be closer? Maybe, probably. I don't know. But could it be worse? Maybe, possibly. I don't know. But, Georgia was a bad matchup for Texas. And the refs don't call any game perfect, right? There was definitely missed calls, but they missed calls against Texas. Texas has played really undisciplined here of late. Lots of penalties right? Lots and lots of penalties. You can go back to the Texas A&M game. There was penalties that cost this team. So I'm interested to see what is the mentality of this team. And I'm not in love with the fact that the head coach can't come to grips with the fact that, hey, we got beat this Saturday. It's always got to be an excuse. Can they own up to what has been the issue for this team this year and move those thoughts out of the way, fix them, and move towards a national championship? That's kind of my thoughts with this team right now. It seems like there's a whole lot of blame game going on every time somebody does something wrong. Quinn Ewers gets sacked 13 times, the 2 times Georgia plays, and everybody's talking about, well, we should have played Arch Manning. No, you should have protected Quinn Ewers. The guy who's been in this offense for 3 years and knows it like the back of his hand. No, you need to protect the quarterback, and you haven't been able to do that. Hence all the holding calls in that game. Any thoughts on this? And just go ahead and give us your prediction, Mason, on the game. I mean, you don't have to comment on this if you don't want to, but I just
I think obviously Texas isn't playing Georgia in this game. I don't think that Clemson is even close to the Georgia program in a sense, or close to, not just as good, but as far as like a matchup goes. I don't really think that Clemson is really anything like Georgia. So maybe Texas has a better matchup with them. But I completely agree, and I think I commented on in our early preview the fact that Texas has been terrible in the red zone because of the run game. Trey Wisner has 2 touchdowns on the year. Like, I know he didn't start the year. It was really the Georgia game, a little bit before the Georgia game, the first time in the regular season that Trey Wisner got going. And so, he didn't play the entire season, but 2 touchdowns is just not enough for your running back. That's the reason why Texas has struggled in the red zone. But outside of that, they do move the football really well. I think that they may still have issues in the red zone this week. I would hope that they would be able to find the end zone at least, 1 or 2 of those trips that they're going to have. But I think that they're in the red zone enough to kick field goals and beat Clemson in kind of a low-scoring game. I don't necessarily feel comfortable taking the under in this one because I could also see Texas scoring, on a lot of those opportunities. But I like Texas in the points here. I think that they win by at least 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, I like Texas here. Mason, I like the under again because I do like Clemson's ability on their defensive line. They've got some dudes there. There's no doubt about it. And I think at certain times throughout this year, those dudes have underperformed. I think they'll be ready. I think defensively, this team will be ready for Clemson. And I think that you make a really good point, and it kind of solidifies my thoughts on this as far as a betting perspective goes on this over-under. I think Texas does kick field goals in the red zone, and I think Clemson struggles mightily to move the football in general. So with that being said, give me the under 51.5 here. Yeah. I feel like that is all the unders in these games I feel like are about to hit. I really do. And, I would say with my luck, that means they'll all go over, but I've had a great year betting, and I really, really like the unders in this situation. But give me Texas to win. Give me Texas to cover. It's a rare double-digit spread here on a game that I think will be real low scoring, but Clemson is going to struggle mightily to move the football here with their swarming Texas defense. And I believe the home team is able to get away with this one. All right, guys. Thank you all for watching. I know we're dwindling down to the last one here. I appreciate y'all hanging out. If you would, hit the like button before you head out tonight. We've got more coming, so don't go anywhere. But if you do, help us out by hitting that real quick. We're going to talk SMU at Penn State, and then we're going to jump into some housekeeping stuff. Not going to keep you long on that stuff, but stuff worth mentioning and just kind of going through real quick. All right, let's jump into this thing. SMU at Penn State. This one's going down on Saturday at noon Eastern. Penn State, 8.5-point favorite, 9-point favorite. Depending on where you look, you may be able to go the other way. a half a point at some places. Over under set at 54. Winner is going to face off against Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl. Look, well, we've got some of the obvious stuff that everybody's talked about, and I think the one thing that's been talked about in this game the most is the weather and how it's going to be cold, and you got guys, coming from Texas where it's not as cold obviously as it is in Pennsylvania and things like that, and I think that there is certainly some type of advantage there. I would think maybe at least to start the game, for Penn State. I think SMU is able to play through that, so we'll set all that to the side. The matchups, if you look on paper, Mason, favor SMU here. They do. I mean, the SMU defensive run stop unit matches up well against what you would consider to be the strength of this Penn State offense, which is running the football. We just saw Penn State come off of a game where they ran for 300 yards, just absolutely ran wild on the Oregon defense. And so you got SMU coming into town here, and they're a team that has been really, really good against the run. I'll put some of their statistics on the screen here, and you guys can look at it as you please there. But defensively, rush yards per game allowed, they're fourth in the country this year. Now, if you go through and you look at that schedule that SMU has played, hasn't exactly been a murderer's row, right? One of their toughest games of the year they played was against BYU. They lost that game. It was earlier in the season when BYU seemed to be on a roll, but that the matchup seems on paper to favor SMU here. But SMU hasn't faced off against Penn State every week. That's not how they came to get that fourth in the country ranking. This is a whole different ball game. This is a different level of competition here, and I'm interested to see how SMU is able to handle that defensively because Penn State knows how good this SMU team is at stopping the run, and I would imagine that they're accepting it as a challenge more than anything because they're going to try to run the football with these awesome running backs that they got, and I think that they should. Got to establish the run if you're Penn State in this one for sure. SMU, the run defense, obviously, I think is a good matchup, but SMU offensively, I think they've got a bit of an advantage in the passing game. I think they're going to be able to pass for some yards. Kevin Jennings is really good at rolling out, creating things with his feet whenever he needs to, but also very good at getting through his progressions and hitting the tight ends, the wide receivers, who running backs out of the backfield, the whole nine. The dude knows how to distribute the football, and ever since he's taken over this SMU offense earlier this season, it's been a totally different team. So I think we saw a lot of nerves for SMU in the first half of the Clemson game. It seemed like they settled in the second half. They obviously did. They mounted a huge comeback and gave up a bad special teams kickoff return that ended up costing them that game. But can they pass the ball effectively against this Penn State defense? I think they're going to have some opportunities. I don't know if it's going to be to the tune of a victory here, Mason, because like I said, this is a step up in competition here. Penn State being at home, I think that gives them a big advantage. What happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? That is the number one thing I'm most interested in this game. What that running game versus that run stop unit. And with that being said, if that run stop unit can stop Penn State, is Drew Aller able to hit some plays over the top? We saw some costly turnovers against Oregon, which I think inevitably probably cost Penn State that game. Is there more? I was impressed by Penn State against Oregon. Are we seeing more of that, or are we reverting back to the Penn State that is just going to play power football and try to win this game? 14-7. We'll have to see how this one goes. But what are your thoughts here?
I do think that it's we're going to see more of Penn State doing what they've really been doing all season long, and with Kotelnicki. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing his name, but seeing more of what he's been able to do all season long with this offense. It does look much more efficient through the air. We've seen Drew Aller take a step up in a lot of ways. Now, it's interesting because you look at Drew Aller's numbers compared to 2023, and he's thrown more interceptions, and his completion percentage is actually down. But he has he's really just taking more shots down the field, and you're seeing his yards per attempt go up because of that. And I think that's what's been most impressive about this offense. I think that this style of Drew Aller is actually much much better for this team, I think, overall. Tyler Warren's obviously gotten involved all year. I think he continues to do well for this team. Also, Harrison Wallace has kind of emerged here as of late, and I think he's going to be completely healthy in this one. So that's a huge advantage, I think, for Penn State. To me, Mark, this game, look, you mentioned that SMU maybe had the jitters in the first half in the ACC game, and it, Kevin Jennings, maybe that has something to do with it. But to me, when I watched that game, I saw a Clemson defense do what they've done all year, and it's fall apart in the last part, the last half of every football game, just about, that Clemson played in. They just absolutely fell apart, starting with the Georgia game, right? We saw them tighten up against Wake Forest. It was kind of the reverse for Wake Forest, but there were a few smaller games throughout the year where we're just going, how the heck did this team put up 31 points in the or put up 31 points against Clemson, and 21 points were in the fourth quarter. And I mean, it was time and time again that these teams were scoring late against Clemson. And I say that to say, I think that SMU took advantage of that. And when I look at Penn State, I don't see their defense doing that. I don't see their defense letting up. I see a defense that's very balanced and really good across the board. And to me, SMU, if they get down early like they did against Clemson, they're not going to have an opportunity to climb back into this football game. And I think I'm predicting that that's exactly what's going to happen here. I don't like this matchup for SMU. I think that it's kind of a terrible matchup in a lot of ways. Now, do they do a good job of stopping the run? Absolutely. But Penn State has found ways to get Tyler Warren involved in most of these football games. When you don't have a absolute unit at linebacker that can match up with Tyler Warren, which SMU does not have, to guard him and cover him, then he is going to be a problem. I think Tyler Warren is a big problem in this football game. I just don't see Penn State having anyone that can really match up with him. And therefore, if you're not able to stop him, I know you can double team him and all that. It hasn't really mattered for teams that have lesser talent than Penn State. SMU fits that role to me, and therefore I think that Penn State's going to be able to score here. One other point that I want to get to before we wrap up, just a point that I don't want to miss. Bo Pribula is not going to be in this football game. He's already hit the transfer portal. He's kind of the run first quarterback option that Penn State likes to use, and it's a shame. I know the kid probably didn't want to do it necessarily, but we're at a certain part of college football where this is almost necessary. So it sounds like Drew Aller's coming back to play his senior year. Bo Pribula, who I had high hopes for in this game and throughout the playoffs, he hits the transfer portal. He's not going to play for Penn State, presumably again. And, that's another weapon that Penn State doesn't have. I don't think that they need him in this game necessarily. It could, in some red zone situations in this one and down the road, it could hurt them. But I just think it's a shame that nobody's come in and corrected the transfer portal window for things like this in the playoffs, when you've got several players who have already put their names in the hat, I guess, so to speak. So interesting there, Mark, but I'll shut up and let you get to some comments.
I just had a couple of them to bring up here. Nothing too serious. But Kevin Chandler, a guy, he watches this channel a pretty good bit. Thanks for watching, Kevin. I appreciate it. He was kind of referring to the defenses in that Big Ten championship. He said, "I've seen both elite defenses getting whooped, and a shootout. We are, and good luck to Penn State this coming up weekend. Oregon's defense was battling a serious flu bug during the Big Ten championship, so factor that into your metrics. We forgot to add that into the model, Mason. We forgot to add in the flu bug into the model. Art of Truth podcast 867A. Appreciate it. Thank you for watching. Yeah, I don't know what truth there is to that. I just thought that was interesting. Like, we hear excuses all the time. I don't know what's true, what's not, or whatever. But I'm Oregon's got 2 weeks to get over it now. Would they have given up 200 yards rushing instead of 300? I don't know. It just seemed to me like Penn State had a good game plan, and it seemed to me like the Oregon run stop unit did not play well. I mean, just flat out didn't play well, and hadn't really faced a run game that good all year, I don't think. So, interesting stuff there. What's your prediction on this one, Mason? I mean, if you want to comment on these, you can. But what is your prediction on this one? Who you got?
I'm taking Penn State. I really just find a hard time believing that SMU is going to be able to do this. Penn State's defense has been really good all year. Dennis Sutton is coming back to play the edge position. I think with him and Abdul Carter creating problems for this offensive line for SMU, unlike any sort of problems they've seen all year. I know that the Clemson defensive line is really good, but I don't think that they're quite as good as Penn State's this year, especially on the edge position. In that case, I think you're going to see some blindside sacks from Kevin Jennings, maybe put the ball on the ground or something like that. And factor in the fact that Penn State gets this game at home. I like them even more. Just a bad matchup for me with SMU. I think that they absolutely deserve to be in the playoffs. I'm not saying that they don't. I don't necessarily think they get run off the field, but I like Penn State in this one. I would stay away from the spread, but I would take the under in here in this game as well. I don't see Penn State being able to run the football like they did against Oregon necessarily. I think that SMU is going to really buy into the run defense and sell out the pass in a sense, and force Penn State to beat them over the top. And in that case, I think you're going to see some punting on Penn State's side of the football, and it's going to lead to a lower scoring game. But to me, the best bet is going to be the under here. But I like Penn State to win the game. And I guess if I had to pick against the spread, I would probably take Penn State by 9 or 10.
Interesting. Yeah, I think this one is I like SMU plus the points here. Now I like Penn State to win this game, but I do like SMU to cover this thing. I think this one is relatively close, as I think most of these playoff games are going to be. I think that SMU has got a chance to throw the football around a little bit in this game. We've seen Penn State be susceptible to the pass, not only against Oregon, but even teams as bad as Bowling Green this season, which Bowling Green was actually a decent passing team. That's a whole nother story, but SMU is a decent passing team as well. I think SMU's run defense is going to be able to cause some punts, but I do think the Penn State runs for, 40, 50 more yards than what SMU is used to giving up per game. We talked about SMU giving up 78 yards a game rushing. I don't think there's a chance in hell Penn State doesn't get 150 yards rushing in this one. 100, 140. So I think Penn State's able to run the football enough to get some first downs, play a little bit of keep away. So with all that being said, I like the under. Give me SMU plus the points, but give me Penn State to win this thing straight up. All right, guys, and that's our last breakdown of the day. We did have a bracket that we wanted to kind of put up here and just kind of, take a look at where we're at, right? You guys kind of tell us what you think. Okay, Mason, lead us through this actually, because this is your baby. So you lead us through this here.
I got you. So this first slide here, y'all, this was our preseason prediction, right? And I think it's important to bring this up first of all to show that our graphics department has gotten a little bit better. I think the graphics I think on this slide are a little weak, but nonetheless, I mean, look, we were 6 out of 12. We were 6 out of 12. I mean, I feel pretty good about what we put out there. I mean, um, almost had Boise State in there actually over App State. Mark talked me out of it, but I'm not going to hold that against you, Mark. We could have had 7 out of no, but Utah obviously Cam Rising goes out and changed the entire script for them. I think Arizona State would have been a better team regardless of whether Cam Rising played or not. And we had obviously Georgia and Oregon in there, rightfully so. We didn't have Texas in there. I think that the one bad play here is Michigan. Um, Michigan's just been terrible. I don't know what I was thinking having them in there, but I had Michigan beating Texas early. Knowing the issues that Texas had at running back, or the injuries, I should say, that Texas had at running back. I did not think that their defense would be this good. Thought they'd have some holes in the run game that Michigan could exploit. So I had Michigan winning that football game early, and Texas just proved to be a really good team overall. So they kind of get the slot in over Michigan there. Had Tennessee in, which I think some talking heads had Tennessee in there, but no Alabama on our card. And we picked that. We predicted that rightfully. We had Alabama with 3 losses and outside of the college football playoff. That happened to be the case. Texas A&M was really close. If they could have beat Texas at the end of the year, I think that they probably get in some form or fashion. And then Miami, probably the other one that I look at and think, not a bad play necessarily. It's just things. I mean, Miami just did Miami things, in my opinion, and lose to Georgia Tech and just kind of let their season slip through their fingers, and don't even make the ACC championship game. I mean, it wasn't that long ago. We still had Miami winning the ACC, right? I mean, that's just like a few weeks ago. and now we don't even talk about them. We don't even mention them. So interesting there, but yeah. And then Ole Miss, I think, is a team. Nobody thinks that Ole Miss isn't capable of winning some games in the playoffs if they were to get in. I think that they are one of the 12 best teams from a power rating perspective. Just lost really a Kentucky game was kind of the one that I just didn't have. I didn't have them losing to Kentucky, and had they won that game, obviously they're in. But yeah, for as crazy of a season as we've seen this year, I feel pretty good about hitting 50%.
We're one of the only shows that's itching to throw up what we had put out there before the season started. I mean, you're not going to see um, ESPN throwing up their preseason brackets and showing you how wrong they were. App State was dumb as hell. That made no sense. Utah. We've learned hard lessons with Cam Rising over and over and over and over again for all 30 years he's been in college football. So we should have known better than that, but we couldn't help ourselves because with him on that team, it definitely looks differently. But I'm with you. The Texas A&M and Michigan ones are the ones that I'm really kicking myself over.
Well, and with A&M, it's really the fact that Connor Wegman was a dud. I mean, I had a lot of hope for him. I thought that we would see the Connor Wegman we saw versus Missouri all season long, and that just wasn't the case.
Let's keep it going. What else you got?
Yeah, and then looking at the first round here, no news here. Graphics department got a little bit of an upgrade, made things a little bit bigger for our visually impaired older viewers, I guess you could say. But yeah, no secrets here. And then based off of our previews and our predictions, we were lined up for the most part on all of these picks. But we've got we've got Tennessee winning and beating Ohio State, Notre Dame beating Indiana, taking on Georgia. We've got Penn State beating SMU, taking on Boise State, and we've got Texas beating Clemson and taking on Arizona State. I mean, I don't really know if you got anything to add to this, Mark. I know you were kind of higher on Ohio State. We kind of middled there. I was a little bit leaning towards Indiana. So we each kind of got a pick there, and I took Tennessee. You took Notre Dame. Um, I would be really interested to see Tennessee's defense against Oregon's offense. I think Oregon's offense is the best in the country right now, and Tennessee out of this group of 8, I think Tennessee has the best defense of the bunch. That would be just a really fun matchup to watch.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, these would be some really entertaining matchups, no doubt about it. You know, Texas is, you know, again lucked right up and slipped into that corner over there. Now, I'm not saying Arizona State is the gimme by any means, but um, you know, that was a easier side of the bracket there. Georgia and Texas were both kind of beneficiaries of that. Obviously, Tennessee, Oregon in the hardest corners of that bracket. Boise State, Penn State, I think is a really interesting matchup there. Um, those two styles of offense, I think, and defensively, I think both those teams are pretty good. So that'll be an interesting matchup. I think one that'll be pretty low scoring there, but yeah, I mean, all this makes sense. Now, things could change. Like we said, Ohio State, I think, definitely has a chance to win at home, obviously. But I like where we're at here.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's kind of the biggest game to me, Ohio State versus Tennessee, as far as, really could go either way. The rest of them, I feel like you're pretty safe picking the favorites in those games to at least win the games outright. But Tennessee and Ohio State's the one where I could see picking the underdog in that one. All right, then you get to the third round, and we've got Georgia over Notre Dame, making it to the semis. We've got Oregon over Tennessee. That offense just kind of outlasts the defense of Tennessee. I have a hard time believing that many teams are going to stop Oregon's offense, which make them an absolute problem, and their defense is very fast, very fast. We saw them. We saw Penn State match up really well against Oregon's defense, but I don't know that many other teams are going to be able to kind of do that throughout this playoff. Texas over Arizona State, no real news there. This is one though that I could see Arizona State coming away with, having an extra week to prepare for Texas. Right, I think Kenny Dillingham is an excellent coach that's not getting enough talk in the work that he's done with Sam Leavitt as a quarterback. On top of obviously the main course there at running back in Cam Scatteraboo. I could see them getting something going on the ground, and that's probably the best way to beat Texas is if you're able to get a strong running game going. But I've got Texas. I just think that they've got more dudes, a higher, more talented roster than Arizona State. And sometimes in those matchups, when it's that there's such a discrepancy in talent, there's just no way that a team's going to win that game. And to me, that's kind of what happens in the Texas and Arizona State game. And then Penn State over Boise. This is another one where I look at and I think, man, Ashton Jeanty is going to be really tough to stop. And my only concern is that I saw Madsen for Boise State really put the ball in harm's way whenever they were forced to throw the football. They're going to be forced to throw the football against Penn State. To me, that's where he makes the mistakes. Penn State's able to capitalize, and they're going to win the football game because of that. I think that Boise State could match up with Penn State from a rushing standpoint and probably outgain Penn State on the ground. But when it comes to passing the football, I've got to give the edge to Drew Aller over Madsen, and I think that he's gonna be able to win them this football game. But I do think it'll be a really good game.
Of all the games, of those 4 games that we're talking about there in that second round, I think Boise State has the best chance to pull off the what I presume will be an upset. I don't know what the line will be on that game, but I assume Penn State will probably be favored probably a little bit in that one. Um, I think Boise's got a chance to win that game. I mean, and it depends on which Penn State shows up, and um, I think Boise has got a chance to, if they can come out balanced, which I've seen them do this year. They've won in other ways than with Genty, but the Maddox, well, obviously Maddox Madsen, I'm talking about, will obviously have to hit some big plays, but we saw him hit a couple of big ones in that conference championship game. And I think it's possible. And not to mention the defensive line for Boise State impressed me a bit. Whenever I watched them in that conference championship game, they were pretty disruptive. Now, UNLV's offensive line ain't the same as Penn State's offensive line. I think we can all agree on that. So we'll see. It'll be a step up in class, but of those games, I feel like Boise's got a chance to win that one. And I just want to, we don't know what's going to go on. We're just doing our best to predict here. And Georgia could lose to Notre Dame, right? If Notre Dame runs the ball successfully, Georgia can lose that football game. There's no doubt about it. Oregon, if they happen to play their worst game of the year, guess what? They're getting beat by Tennessee. And I think, by the way, I think if Tennessee can win that first round matchup and get faced off against Oregon, we saw what Penn State did running the football against Oregon. What do you think Tennessee's going to do? Tennessee can run the football too. So, I could see Tennessee having some success against that Oregon defense. And I think you're right, Mason. I think Oregon's offense more than likely would outlast them. But what if they have one of those days where they're turning the ball over, So there's a lot of, ifs and buts here. So just kind of, take it with a grain of salt. But, all right, what else you got?
All right, then moving on to the championship. So, just two games to kind of discuss there. We've got Georgia over Penn State. I think it's a good matchup for Georgia going up against Penn State. They've been good at stopping the run. I think that Georgia is going to be able to pass the football in this one. There's a chance that Carson Beck is back at this point, which sounds crazy. But to me, I just, man, I don't see. I've seen Georgia get up for so many games this year in a way that we haven't seen other teams have to do. Georgia had to do it 4 times this year, 5 really if you count the Tech game, and they did it in 3 of those 5. You know what I mean? And really 4 of the 5 because I think that they got up for Alabama. It was just kind of a shootout at the end of the game, but nonetheless, I think Georgia gets up for all these games in the playoffs that they get to play in, and Penn State going up against Georgia's defense. I think it's a bad matchup for them. Penn State is going to rely on a few chunk plays down the field, and Georgia's been able to. They've proven all year long that they're kind of a bend don't break defense. They don't give up 2 or 3 of those chunk plays. We said that Tennessee would have to get 2 or 3 of those chunk plays to beat Georgia, and they couldn't hit them. And I think that the same can be said for Penn State here, and Georgia is going to be able to outlast Penn State. And then Oregon over Texas. This is kind of a tough one because, again, we're talking about an Oregon offense that is very good going up against a Texas defense. I think that matchup's a little bit of a wash, if I'm honest. I don't see that game being very high scoring for the most part. But I look at the other side of the football, and I look at Oregon's defense. As fast as they play, going up against Texas's offense, I think that's where Oregon finds the advantage, and that's why Oregon ends up winning this football game. They just fly around the football on that side of the ball, and we've seen Texas's offense really struggle at times this year, and I think that they struggle against Oregon's defense. Maybe Quinn Ewers throws a couple picks. Maybe we see Arch Manning in this game, but nonetheless, I'm taking the number 1 team in the country to win that football game. And then, Mark, I'll go ahead and tell you, as of right now, I'm leaning towards Oregon to win the national championship because of what we saw with that offense going up against Penn State's defense. And really the past few weeks since Tez Johnson has come back from injury, I think that this Oregon team has just looked so much better. And he's really sparked this offense. I expect that to continue. And as of right now, I'm picking Oregon to win the national championship. But we know this game's not going to be played for several weeks. We're not going to see this game until close to the end of January. So we got plenty of time, plenty of games to watch. I reserve the right to change my pick, right, when we do the national championship preview. For sure. And for all these games, really, after the first round, we'll see what these teams are doing. But I know you guys want us to kind of give you our take as of right now, as it stands. And right now, I've got Oregon winning the national championship.
My whole thing with this is, I think Oregon's the best team in the country right now. I don't think there's, the defense has got some questions that need to be answered in this playoff. The defense is going to have to step up. I don't think you're going to be able to just gunsling your way to the national championship. I don't think it's that type of offense. I think it's really, really good. It's the best that we've got available this year, but I don't sit and think of this Oregon offense like the 2019 LSU offense or something like that. So I don't know that they're able to just gunsling their way to a national championship. But the thing is with Georgia got set up in a nice spot in this bracket. There's no doubt about that. I mean, it's inevitable. Some teams had easier paths than others. We got to see what this Georgia team is all about now, because we talked about it before the show started. Georgia is going to have a different identity on offense with Gunnar Stockton at quarterback if Carson Beck is in fact going to be out the rest of the playoffs. And Mason, everything that I've read, that's what it indicates to me. We're not going to know for sure until the games are played, because everything's pretty tight-lipped for the most part. But it doesn't sound good for Carson Beck. So is Georgia able to install a wrinkle offensively that teams are not going to be able to find on film? That's kind of where I'm at. Let me see this Georgia offense and what it looks like with Gunnar Stockton at the helm. But it's obviously a hit on Georgia's resume or whatever you want to call it whenever you're comparing them to another team to win a national championship. I can't just sit here and say, well, even Georgia with their backup quarterback, they'll beat Oregon. That's Georgia's not that much better than everybody, right? Especially this season. This isn't a 2021 Georgia defense that can just strangle people to death. It's a different style of team that we've got here. Let's see offensively what the new wrinkles are with the running quarterback and how that affects the game. I think Georgia's run game is going to be that much better. It seems like Georgia is kind of transforming more into that Kirby Smart-esque style of wanting to run the football. It seems like they've gotten better as the years went on doing that. And so can Georgia carry that over into the playoffs? I think that's a big question, and it's yet to be answered. And with that being the case, I have to pick Oregon here. I have to be objective and tell you how I really feel. And Georgia's the best thing that Georgia's got going for them, other than the fact that they're one of the most talented teams in the country, which is obvious the way they've recruited. It's a will to win and figuring out ways to win. And Georgia's been really good at that this year. So can they continue that? It seems like they got momentum. Georgia's been playing playoff football since they beat Tennessee earlier in the season. Every week has been win or go home, essentially. And Georgia is undefeated so far in that scenario. Can they keep it going? Everybody's down to their last loss at this point. So playoff football, here we come. All right, guys. That's about it that we've got today. Thank y'all so much for watching. I think Mason, let's just hold off on some of this other stuff. We had like some transfer portal stuff. I mean, this stuff is so undecided at this point. I mean, we can just kind of mention some of the stuff here. Obviously, Bill Belichick going to North Carolina. We kind of talked about that some last week. We're going to have the offseason to talk a lot about that, but that news is finalized. Rich Rod going back to West Virginia. I think that's a big deal, but maybe not something that's going to be a big deal right away, right? I don't think West Virginia is all of a sudden going to be in the running for the Big 12, although crazier things have happened. And when Rich Rod left that program, it was in a lot better shape than what he's getting it now. So we'll see what happens there. Barry Odom takes over at Purdue. That's an uphill climb. Dan Mullen taking over at UNLV. Those are kind of some of the highlights of the coaching changes that have went on. Not the coaching carousel has not been real crazy. We'll see what happens when some of those NFL jobs open up and see if some guys transition from college to the NFL. I think inevitably there'll be at least a couple that do that. As far as the transfer portal goes, lots of guys are entering. I mean, go figure, right? That's kind of what we've come to figure out. Ole Miss is on the move again. I see Ole Miss popping up a lot for some big time players, some of the best players available right now. Ole Miss is pouncing on those. Tons of guys leaving Alabama. There's a good bit of guys leaving Georgia, not necessarily starters, but the typical teams that have their cup running over with talent are bleeding a little bit and losing some of those guys as we just passed early signing day, and so guys are leaving, guys are coming, and this is just kind of how it is. I think we're going to have to let the dust settle a little bit more before we're going to be able to really address this thing. So with that being said, I think we're ready to close the show out. Mason, you got anything else for the good folks?
No, not for now. We'll catch you guys on Saturday night after the entirety of the first round has been played. We'll catch you up on Friday night's matchup. Can't wait to see it. Cannot wait to see it and have all of you back on the show Saturday night. I know you're going to be just chomping at the bits to get on the show and give us your takes on how the games went. We'll have a live link if you want to join the show and you want us to hear your voice. Maybe get on the show yourself and tell us what you thought about the games. We are definitely down for that. But we'll see you guys on Saturday night. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank y'all all so much for watching the First and Long College Football Show. Hit that subscribe button on your way out. Hit the like button on your way out. We're going to see you guys real soon. Good luck to all your teams. I'm here for the good games. I don't care who wins these suckers until they face off against my Georgia Bulldogs. So best of luck to all your teams. I'll be watching on Pins and Needles, and we'll see you all this weekend. Thank you so much.